Smith from Pagham Harbour, RSPB mentioned it, thank you very much for coming downstairs, with an update on what is surely one of the most legendary locations in Sussex birding, with probably, I would say, more waded species having been recorded there than anywhere else. And give us an update on Ferry wetlands, thank you.
Cheers, Adrian. Thanks for giving me the pre-coffee break afternoon slot again. I'd like to continue. Yeah, so a couple of years ago I presented our plans for the Ferry Wetlands project. Some of you may have been there. So this is kind of a progress report. We have made some progress. We're not fully there yet. It's quite a complicated project. These things often drag on because you've got to go for planning, get various consents and things like that. But we're getting there. So I'm just going to give you a quick recap of kind of why we're doing the point of the project, the aims, what we've done so far, and what's to come. So this is just, well, as it says in the tin, aims and outcomes. So I'll just run through these quickly because it's a bit dry, but we want to get, so one of the main aims is better salinity control in the lagoon, so that's the ferry pool, as it's known. There's a rare shrimp was found there a few years ago, Gammarus insensibulus, which no one would have heard of, no one's interested in really. But it earned the site its marine conservation zone status, so we now have an obligation to keep conditions favourable for that species, and that involves keeping salinity within quite strict limits. But we have, thus far we've had a job maintaining those levels because it flushes through with fresh water in the winter when we get a lot of heavy rain, and in the summer obviously it dries out, becomes hypersaline, salinity goes up, so we have a job trying to maintain that salinity. The next aim, diversify lagoon with islands and deeper water areas. That's kind of self-explanatory. We want the islands, but we all know that a lot of shorebirds, seabirds like nesting on islands, so trying to increase the breeding interest of the lagoon itself, reduce wave action on the edge of the lagoon because it becomes quite shelved from wind action in winter. Decrease areas of shallow water, spread out areas connected to the main central ditch. So this is a big aim to try and make the fields in that area a lot more productive for breeding birds and wintering birds. So often the lagoons, ferry pools are the focal point. Fields are a bit boring because it's just an expanse of grass that we struggle to keep wet. So yeah, a big thing was to try and increase the sort of the habitat, enhance the habitat within the field area. The next improve in field freshwater retention is part of that. Reduce mammal predator pressure. Again, the fence component of it is to do just that, to keep foxes and badgers out essentially, which, as most of you know, probably quite a major factor in the breeding success of ground nesting birds. It's an easy meal. And increase overall bird interest. And just sort of following on from that, a few pictures to illustrate the kind of challenges we have. So that one in the top left there, that's a pump that, which one's it point to? That's the pump that we often have to hire in summer to pump fresh water from the ditch into the lagoon to bring out salinity. It doesn't use diesel, very expensive. It's a bit of a pain in the neck for site managers and the warden's perspective. It's just hassle. And then, yeah, so fairly, that's it looking bone dry in the spring when you kind of want shallow pools and that for your waders and for your wader chicks to be feeding around. That's a central bund that inexplicably was occupying like the low ground in the field, so it's kind of a barrier to water finding its way into some shallow neighbouring areas. So you can see there that there's perfect low-lying ground there with no water getting to it because of this bund. So the plan was to pull that out, so we can enhance those sprout areas. And that's the Ferry Field itself. I mean, there is a bit of higher ground there, but a lot of scrub at the edge, so that's not so good for attracting breeding birds. That's at the back of the field, which you can't really see from the high too well. But it's just a fairly monotonous expanse of grassland with not many features, so generally not much bird interest there. And there's the lagoon as well, where there's not much going on there. This kind of just recaps what I just said. Somebody was talking earlier about triple SI status. We've got an obligation to make these sites, to protect these species, make these sites better. That's covered that slide really. Actually, just a quick note on that. This kind of shows you the trajectory. I mean, it's a bit of a mixed picture. It's a bit up and down, and I thought it was only up to 2023 when I last did this, but I thought I'd put it in 2024 because there was actually a bit of a pulse in breeding activity for these two species, having redshank, which are classic wet grassland waders, and that's because it was a really wet winter, really wet spring, and it just kind of shows that. So it stayed wet well through the spring. It just shows that water is key to attracting these birds to breed. And that was the plan. It's a bit of an eyesore, to be honest. Well, it's for me. But that kind of just summarises what we're trying to do and where. Obviously increase the water in bits in the middle. That green line there isn't a text box for this for some reason, but that green line there is where that bund was sitting, so it's kind of blocking the water from getting into the lower lying ground. Some islands in the lagoon itself there, reprofile the edges, and a big part of it was to stick a sluice in there so we can drain water into the ditch rather than it flushing through the lagoon, and a solar pump so we can extract water from the ditch without having to hire an expensive diesel pump. They're the main things, and obviously the predator fence going right around the edge. So that should be fairly visually unimpactful because it will hug the edge of the field. You will unfortunately see it along the edge of the lagoon there, but we've modified it slightly to try and reduce that visual impact. And it will be an essential component of this project to protect the nesting species. I'll throw this in just to show, it kind of shows where the low-lying ground is, a bit dry really, but so we kind of exploit all these low points here and put a new bund in, separate a bund around the higher ground there. And that's just the same map overlaid with the plans. So we're just at the point when we're putting in planning permission, applying for flood risk activity permits and things like that. When I last spoke to you, part of the planning application with environmental impact assessment was done. So we had to make a few tweaks. There's a badger set right at the end of the field there, actually, which probably explains why the breeding productivity has been so bad for so many years. And it's very active. I mean, there's badger trails running out left, right and centre, one going right down into these areas. So they're snuffing around every night, eating what they can. A few exposed eggs on the grass is a lot easier than digging for worms, so they're the first to go. We've brought the fence line in a bit, so you have to leave a 30-metre buffer so you don't disturb that badger set. So we've had to cut that end of the field. It doesn't matter too much because there's quite a few tall trees there, so you don't really get birds nesting. These ground nesting birds aren't instinctively won't nest very close to tall vegetation because it's predator perches. And we just identified where there's plenty of these areas that badgers can use instead, which they're already doing. And amazingly, we did waterhole surveys that spring, and it's good, but it was annoying as well that we found loads of signs along this ditch. Normally it would have been bone dry by May, but because it was a wet winter, it was full of water. There were waterhole signs everywhere. Where the hell come from, I don't know. It's, like I say, it dries out completely in the summer, so they obviously partially migrate. I guess they're in the rife down here. So we basically had to retain that section of bund and just sort of divert the fence a bit there. To be honest, I was quite, initially I was annoyed by that, but then I thought, well, actually that's not necessarily a bad thing, because we're going to remove the bund all down here and water will still be able to get either side of that, and it's kind of a bumpy feature that things can nest on within those expanded wetland areas as well. So I hope, so then last year we got to the point, we got planning permission and everything. I've spared you people on slides about that, but it was a slightly onerous process. So that Wally there was involved in marking out the site prior to the contractors coming in last summer. So we timed the work so that you're not going to impact any breeding birds, so very late summer, early autumn, and when it's most likely to be dry, so your machinery can access without getting stuck in theory. And so we dried the lagoon out, a lot of you would have seen that, and it looked horrible. It was just an expansive, what you can see there. And then, so this picture is, the reason I put this in is because I went out and marked where we wanted the island, so I'd already put 2 in at this point, and then this is me striding purposefully out into an area of the lagoon which is much closer to the hides than where the ferry hide, than where the closest island actually ended up. So I've got some very high-tech equipment there. I'm clutching a batch of bamboo cane sprayed, the top sprayed orange, and sporting some high-tech mud boots, which are small squares of plywood attached to a pair of Wellingtons with a bit of rope. And there's me approximately half an hour later, minus the mud boots, pointing to the scene of the minor disaster. So, as you can probably deduce, I got stuck. And the way is, the thing with the mud boots is I strapped them on so tight I couldn't get my feet out of the wellies, so I was out there for quite a long time. We did have a winch and a throw line on standby in case there's anyone from the health and safety gets. But yeah, the reason I put that in though is to explain why it is we had to set the island a bit further back. It's once upon a time the wider expanse of the lagoon closest to the hide there would have been deep water, but obviously over years and years and years it's just with silt deposits. It's now about 6 foot of very smelly black mud, and it's impossible to get a 30-ton machine out there to do any work. And even if we were to deposit loads of material there to try and make an island, it would just sink. It's like a blanc, it's like chocolate mousse, you know. So in the end, we had to put the islands a bit further away than we wanted one a bit closer, just about viewing spectacle and just to occupy that kind of wider area of water. So we did have to set them back a bit further, which some of you may have seen from the hide. You still see them quite well, but yeah, you do have to tweak these plans, you know, quite often, because it's all very well mapping stuff out and doing all the prep, but you know, conditions change, and the lagoon had never been dried out that much whereby we could have gone out and investigated that. So I'm going to bombard you with photos now, mostly of mud, so just to warn you. So this is just some of the stuff that we did. So that's the digger sculpting the islands, and then that's one of the finished islands. That's actually the easternmost one, so the hide's over here. And you can see it's a bit of a mess over here, and that's where the digger was really struggling, because we were getting into that deeper mud, and they had to bring out some mud doors to get out. But yeah, it's kind of see, they're actually a lot bigger than they look from the hide, the islands, and you can see that there. And we trench either side so that even when this dries out, these areas will dry, there'll still be a moat of water around there, and that's just to kind of give any breeding birds, that kind of sense of security, once the lagoon levels start dropping, because they'll still be surrounded by water, and that's what makes them feel safe, and that's why these birds gravitate towards Ireland. And there's the 3 islands. You've got the little one closest to the hive there, the middle one, and slightly more sort of wonky one at the back there. That's the one we just left that as mud. So that's where we hope the ancestors will nest, and we put some stone on these ones. So we're trying to put in common terns, risk catchers, ring cover potentially, and that's the reprofiled edge. Most exciting picture. That's the stone before it went on one of the islands, and that's the bloke putting the stone on the islands in an amphibious digger in some point in December. So we had to wait for the lagoon to fill up before he could do that, because that thing doesn't operate. It's an amphibious digger, so it needs water to operate. So that was quite cool to watch. So we left that one muddy. These 2 have got varying degrees of stone on them. So they're slightly different heights as well, so as the water level fluctuates, you get different areas exposed, so that's kind of good for sort of diversity of niches of different species. I'll whiz through these, I'm probably going to go wrong here. I'll start messing around with animations here, I'm afraid. I'm not going to explain that, you can see what it is. It's a thing that's scraping out a scrape. So we sort of enhance a lot of, create a lot of these sort of shallow ditch and scrape areas. That's the bung that we put at the edge to try and to protect the bank. So we're planning to hold a lot more water in those fields. We want to protect that bank. You've got the rife, the ditch on the other side of that. So it's to reinforce it in case to reduce that flood risk. That was a borrowed pit, so a lot of the clay, all the material we used was site 1, so we didn't import any material, we didn't export any either, we just kind of recycled what was. There's a lot of clay in the ground at the back of them fields, and you need clay because it's impervious. That was a pit there that we dug a load of clay out on any material that wasn't suitable for these kind of things. We just dumped the excess material in that pit, so now it's just a nice scrape. That's the new separator bund going in. It looks a bit messy there, so that's to separate out saline areas from the freshwater areas. And that's when the new scrapes are excavated at the back of the field without any water in it, but you kind of get the idea. Nice shallow edges, that's crucial for these features, because as the water draws down, you want to maximise that kind of muddy edge, and that's what the waders are feeding. And then that was the top end of that, the old bund scraped out, so that's to allow water in this ditch to spin, which I was talking about earlier. And that's our new sluice. So this allows us to drain water into the ditch rather than it flushing through the lagoon. So they can see it without the boards in, they can see it with the boards in, and they can see it doing what sluices do, stopping water from releasing, although some did get released, and I'll come to that. And that's the shiny new solar pump, bit of a beast. It had to be because the water levels in the Ferry Field ditch there, Broad Drive, sorry, quite low, and they're actually too low to pump at the moment, and we're talking to the EA about that. So solar panels, so environmentally friendly, and that's I'll see this one. We put a bit of hedge just to screen the solar panels, because you can see them from the road, and they're quite nickable. And we've got either side of this separator bump here, you can just see there's a little pipe, so there's a chamber in there that we can basically divert water into the saline lagoon area or the freshwater area as required. So we might want to divert it, say, around about this time of year when it dries out a bit too quickly in the freshwater area. We're going to pump into that area to try and sort of keep keep those scrapes wet. Follow me? Yeah, all right, okay. Let's just do some action. There's some pictures of how it's looking in the winter. So it's kind of doing its job. Nice and wet at the back of the field there. Well, I don't need to explain that. That's kind of what we're going for. And that's just to show, the water's receding there, particularly with these nice muddy edges, and that's kind of exactly what we want. Results so far, so I didn't have any, I tried to dig out some actual numbers from the web data, but the web data doesn't reflect how good the numbers were at times, because obviously it's just at one point in a month, but I don't know if any of you saw it over the winter, but there really wasn't pulsing numbers of these species, and using the whole site as well, not just the lagoon, which is really pleasing. And we've got less than certain moist patches on the island, so that's a new one. And just a few minor hiccups. There's quite a lot of erosion of the bank, which we'll have to have a look at. I won't go on this too much, but the pictures kind of tell the story. So there's a few repair jobs for us to contend with this summer, basically. But and the fence has been delayed, so that's scheduled to go in this summer, and that's kind of a design for it. So it'll be dummy in sort of badgers sticking underneath, a little bit of an overhang, so things going over. Right, and yeah, that's it.
Very much, and that hopefully gives you an idea of how complex some of these things can be as well, and what you have to do out there on site, but you've got environmental impact assessments, planning permissions, and dodgy Wellingtons that you need done. So we've got a mini break now. I've got a little bit of flex in timing, so if you could be back at 3:25, your last chance to go and see the stallholders, last chance to do the raffle, last chance to do the silent auction, and we'll see you back in 10 minutes. Thank you.